Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, my neighbor falsely claims that half of my driveway and a part of my garden, including my pool, belong to him. He says he did a survey and I have to hand over my property. Here is what happened. The title story starts like this. I recently bought a property in the suburbs, a massive upgrade from the pokey apartment that I was in previously. It took me so many years to save up for because every time I got close to raising the funds, I had to fork out money for something. New car, new boiler, so on and so forth. So when I finally got the keys to the house, I was ecstatic. I could not believe it. I am well into my 30s and this is the first time I genuinely felt like I was adulting right. When I moved in, all the neighbors came around and welcomed me to the street, something I really thought they only did in movies. However, I had so much brownies and casserole to eat, I did not need to cook for days. The only person I did not meet was the neighbor to the side of me. Some of the others of the street informed me that she went on holiday to Australia most of the winter months. What I found strange was, but didn't really think about, was how everyone was wishing me luck and how I was a brave man. I just figured it was the normal thing to do to a new homeowner. It's a scary prospect and I need all the luck I can muster. What really sold me on the place was the fact that it came with a pool. Nothing impressive, but big enough to be able to lounge around and maybe swim a couple of laps. It was the real selling point and now all my friends wanted to spend all their weekends around mine. I was the belle of the ball, hosting barbecue parties, garden parties, pool parties, literally any excuse to have the boys around or the family to show off my modest pool. So the time eventually came where the winter months were coming to an end and spring was making itself known. The whole street was abuzz about the return of Karen. The way people spoke about it, I thought it was the end of the world or something, and when I would ask the neighbors about the Karen, they made it sound like a hurricane was whipping through the street. My first actual experience with Karen was when I came home from work late one afternoon and found a car already parked on my driveway. It's a decent-sized driveway, wide enough for 2 cars, but with only a single driveway. Whosever car it was, they were at least polite enough to not park their car in front of the garage. I kept an eye out, curtain twitching as some might call it, but all through the night the car did not move. In the morning, the car was still there. When I went to work, the car was still there as well. When I came back from work, it looked like the car had moved and was put right back on the drive again. I then called a neighbor and asked them about it, and they literally said, looks like Karen is back from seeing her relatives in Australia. So it turned out to be my neighbors. I went around to see Karen to ask her to move her car off my property. It all started friendly enough. She pleased with me, saying that the previous owner had let her park on the driveway because her house did not have one. I told her it was all fine and dandy, but that person does not live at my house anymore and I would rather that she did not park on my driveway. That is when she started to get moody with me and really aggressive about me allowing her to park there because she didn't want to park her car on the road. "Next you will be telling me that I cannot use your pool," she says. And then I flat out told her that my pool was off limits to her unless she asks first. I wasn't gonna be mean about it, I would have let her use the pool, but apparently asking permission was a step too far for her. "I own half of that pool and the driveway," she practically shouted at me. She thought that because the previous owner let her use the pool whenever she wanted, that gave her some sort of ownership rights. She ended up storming off, shouting some rubbish about getting lawyers involved. I don't think anything came of it because I didn't hear anything from her since then. Even when we crossed paths, she would turn her back on me and pretend that I did not exist. All the neighbors had a joke and a laugh about it, saying that they saw the argument and that I had finally came face to face with the Karen. She was a bit of a celebrity about these parts for her meddling and demanding of her own way. All their derogatory comments finally made sense. She was the type of person that would knock on your door if your grass was getting too long. She would come out broom in hand to scare off the street kids whenever they would play hockey out in the road. One person once had a dark red front door and they were barraged with an endless stream of letters and complaints saying their door did not fit with the aesthetic of the rest of the street. She was that kind of busybody, so things quieted down for a little while until I started to notice little things about the house were happening. Cat poo appeared on my back lawn, several actually floating in the pool. My bins always kept getting knocked over, even though we don't have raccoons where we live, so I figured maybe it was just the dogs. I just took it for one of those things that just happen, it's no big deal, animals will be animals. We encroach on their home, so I cannot really get upset about them encroaching on mine. I almost felt like I was living in nature until the day my wife caught Karen hooving cat poop over the fence. I didn't want to speak to her, not really. I knew it was only gonna devolve into childish bickering and name-calling. So then I went straight to a solution. I called up a professional and got a fence installed. I made sure this thing was tall enough to prevent Karen from lobbing cat turds onto my lawn. I checked before I did anything, as fencing rules can be a little funny. Even though you own the garden area, you only own one side of the fencing, and luckily for me, mine was on Karen's side. I also had a bin locker installed to stop Karen getting at my bins. I don't think she liked that very much, and Karen got super childish about it. 2 weeks later, I get a letter through the post. A letter from the civil courts informing me that my fence was illegal and that it had to be torn down. I was confused by this because the guys I got to install the fence assured me that I was well within my rights to have a fence built there, as high as it was. I got the permits and everything. It all got very interesting when I visited the local legal aid to have the court order appealed, and the solicitor I was speaking to said that it was a very strange letter, as there was not any of the usual details on the back. Normally, legal notices come with a string of contact details on the back of the letter where you can call, email, write or whatever to the civil court, and also details about appealing and payment fines. A little digging on the solicitor's part and they found that the letter had been falsified and the person who had forged it was gonna be in a lot of trouble. I feel bad about this, but I instantly name-dropped Karen without thinking too much on it. I wished I had just left it at that. I was not after getting anyone in trouble, but at the same time, if I just ignored it, no doubt Karen would have thought of some even more heinous plot to annoy me into dismantling the fence or something. Months went by and I would see Karen on occasions and she would give me lip about how my fence was still up. I played along saying that I was a rebel and cared little for the letter of the law. That made her jaw hit the floor. I even went as far as telling her that I was ready for a shootout if it came to it, barricading my windows and everything. I'm not proud of what I did or said, but it was fun at the time to mess with the woman that was turning my first homeowner experience into a nightmare. Then one sunny Saturday morning, I see Karen coming out of her house in an orange jumpsuit and high-vis vest. I tried to ask her about it, but she just blanked me. I practically don't exist to her anymore, which I can live with, but what I heard on the grapevine, she got busted for forging legal documentation and is now doing community service picking up cat poop around the suburbs. Even though she brought this upon herself, I cannot help but feel like the a-hole for dropping her in the crap, but still I feel like it would have just escalated if I did not step in. And yeah, Ripe Stars, please let me know in the comments whether you think OP is the a-hole here or not. I would say he is definitely not the a-hole, because Karen deserved these legal consequences, and in the long run this will help the neighborhood because Karen might calm down. To be honest, instead of feeling like an a-hole, OP should get a medal or an award or something instead for standing up to Karen. Let me know what you think in the comments. The next one is another Am I the a-hole story. Am I the a-hole for calling the police? About a week ago my cat got out and went missing for a few days. I was heartbroken. I put his litter box outside, hung flyers everywhere and literally cried non-stop. It was bad, and then I noticed someone was taking down my flyers. This made me really upset, so I started knocking on people's doors. One neighbor told me that she overheard her neighbor's kid excitedly thanking his mom for a new cat, and when I walked up their driveway, what do you know, my cat was sitting in their windowsill. He immediately started pawing at the glass when he saw me, and it broke my heart. I knocked on the front door and explained to the lady that answered that this was my cat, he is chipped and everything, so I have proof that he is mine. She literally laughed in my face and slammed the door. I knocked again, and this time a huge dude answered and told me, "This is my son's cat, now go away," and slammed the door in my face. I went home and bawled like a baby. I called my dad, he's the county sheriff, to tell him what happened and to ask what I should do. He told me to stay home and that he would send over a deputy to take care of it, and well, apparently the deputy let it slip that I was the county sheriff's daughter, and now the catnapper lady is telling everyone in the neighborhood that I'm a spoiled brat who went crying to her daddy. The thing is, I would have called the cops regardless. The only reason I called my dad first is because I was bawling and didn't want to sob on the phone to a stranger if I could avoid it, plus I wanted his advice on how to get my cat back. Apparently the kid's dad also went to jail because the deputy ran his plates and saw that he had a warrant, so this woman is also telling everyone I got her partner arrested too. But how was I supposed to know the guy had a frickin' warrant? I just wanted my cat back. Am I the a-hole? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know what you think about this in the comments, but personally I would say OP is definitely not the a-hole, and if I would be in that situation and someone stole my Disney, I would probably go nuclear. No questions asked. Either way, some people in the comments said, not the a-hole, they stole your cat. Whatever they get after that is completely their own fault. Keep your kitty indoors though, so they cannot get to it again. Comment number 2, not the a-hole. This is the epitome of play stupid games, win stupid prizes. They stole your cat and tried to refuse to keep him. It's not your fault that they did that. It's definitely not your fault that the guy was evading arrest. Keep your cat indoors in case they try it again and know that you did everything right. And yeah, Ripe Stars, honestly, if anyone would say that OP is the bad person in this story, I would definitely question their judgment and maybe even go as far as call that person an idiot. Screw anyone who steals pets. And the next one is a revenge story. In October 2014, I moved into a basement room and shared it with a lady from Oman. The LL landlord and his wife lived upstairs but shared nothing with us. I am short 5'6" and have short arms and a beer belly. So reaching the back burner safely is not always easy for me. The large front burner was broken the day I moved in and I asked the landlord to fix it. I then went and bought some groceries and while I was out he went in and fixed it. Later I learned that he simply used a 14-gauge wire to move the power from the back to the front right burner. Fast forward to 2016. The fixed burner starts to spark. In early February I ask him to go buy a new stove as the one he has is not safe. I then go online, find a half-dozen local scratch and dent and refurb companies that have new or refurbished stoves for under 500 bucks. He refuses and again just fixes it with 14-gauge wire. At this point, I'm not feeling 100% safe in my own apartment, so I called the Toronto Fire Department safety inspectors and the Ontario Electrical Safety Authority. They come in and find about 40 violations each. A month later, after about 8 hours of work and a new $800 stove, the electrician leaves and the ESA inspects again and approves it. That night, my landlord comes banging on my door and tells me that I cost him $10,000 in repairs and fines and I'm being evicted in 60 days. I looked him in the eye and said, man, if you just effing listened to me and bought that $300 stove at the scratch and dent place, you could have saved $9,700, right? And shut the door in his face and cranked the TV so I didn't hear him knocking anymore. Edit, 6 weeks later, I moved out on my own volition because I got tired of him and his wife stomping around. Eventually, I moved into a nice studio apartment and been here a while now. And yeah guys, if you have ever been in the unfortunate situation of dealing with an awful landlord, then I would love to hear your story either in the comments or on r/ripe stories on Reddit, where you can post your own long stories and there's a good chance I will read them in a video. Thank you so much. And now let's move on to the next story. Thursday morning last week, I got an appointment randomly scheduled with the CEO. Come to find out, they were laying me off and would send further details via email. In the email, it just said sometime during this week send your laptop, monitor and computer accessories to XYZ address and to use their billing account. I complied with their demands. So I went to my local FedEx with just the items unpacked. I asked the worker if they would package it all for me using their highest quality wrap and make sure it's incredibly secure. They just smiled and said they understand exactly what to do since I told them I got laid off by this company and I don't care how much they bill them. They began using foot after foot of bubble wrap and yards of tape. Come to the end of the packaging process, they show me the bill and it's $68. Not a ton, but it was worth the laugh. And the next one starts like this. I recently read a story in here that reminded me of a malicious compliance I did years ago. This is a weird but innocuous one, so I hope you enjoy. Many years ago, I worked at a small cafe. The customers were generally lovely and it was not a very popular place due to it being in a weird location, so it was always slow and quiet. We often got regular customers in, and when I started I was warned about the soy lady. She was an older woman who came in to order an extra large takeaway cup of extremely hot soy milk. The staff would heat 2 cups of soy milk to the edge of burning, put it on the counter and call her name. She'd sit down at a table and wait for about 5 minutes after her name was called, then collect it. She then always came back to the counter after drinking half to complain the soy milk was not hot enough and demand for it to be redone. Of course, for free. She also argued the cost $3 relentlessly when she ordered at the counter. Our manager was a spineless weasel and hated customers getting Kareny at the counter in case it caused other customers to think this is a bad place, so he always caved to her bizarre demands and would berate the staff in front of her so he would look good for being a tough manager. So shortly after I started, I met the soy lady. It vaguely bothered me that she was getting away with nasty comments to staff and an absolutely ludicrous addiction to lava-hot soy milk, because what the hell, but not enough to actually do anything about it. Until one day my manager decided that it was our fault we could not make the soy milk to her specifications, which apparently costed the business a lot of money, and he would take the full cost of her drink from our paycheck each time she returned it. Illegal? Yes, for sure. Immoral? Absolutely. Completely insane? You know it. So the next day my manager decided to take the morning off, presumably due to the mutinous mood of the cafe staff. The soy lady rocks up, argues the cost of $3 as usual, pays, and then says, "Don't forget to make it hot this time," with a nasty smirk on her face. Filled with sudden inspiration, I ask, "As hot as I can make it?" She replied, "Yes, even though I doubt you could do it right." Neat. I insisted she wait at the counter because it was gonna be ready immediately. I filled up a metal jug with soy milk, shoved it under the espresso steamer wand and let it scream. You're supposed to adjust the jug so the milk spins, but I just let it boil, screaming loudly as I stared blankly right at her horrified face. For what felt like 2 minutes, though probably shorter. She started to look nervous halfway through and every customer was staring. 45 seconds in, she started to tell me that it was done, but I shouted, "I think it can still get hotter," over the wail of the burning soy milk. Finally, I took it off the wand, which was now crusted brown with burnt milk, tripled up on the takeaway cups because it was unbearably hot, and then told we now charge $5 for cups of soy milk starting immediately, and we charged the full price for refills, management orders. Not true, but I was done by that time. Interestingly, I never saw the soy lady again. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, this dude deserves an award for dealing with this entitled Karen customer. That is just textbook malicious compliance. Absolutely perfect. The next one is titled My Epic Tale of Revenge. Years ago, my, fortunately now ex-wife, and I decided to change from the cozy single-story home we were in and get something with more space for us to spread out and live more comfortably. We had her late teenage son living with us, our 3 Rottweilers, plus I needed a dedicated study for my work. I'm in technology and often worked from home. After months of searching, we found our dream home. Beautiful 2-story, 4-bedroom plus study with huge amounts of space everywhere. Seriously huge, the laundry was bigger than my bedroom growing up. The quality of everything was amazing, square set walls, no cornices. Polished Tassie oak flooring, floor-to-high ceiling windows in the living areas, and 2 walls comprising commercial-grade bistro doors that opened up an entire corner of the house onto the covered outdoor entertaining area. The standard of the build was no surprise. This was a display home up until it landed on the market. We were to be the first people to live in it. I'm going to gloss over months of details and pain, but we had problems with the place from day 2, literally. On night number 2, the plumbing under the ensuite shower gave out and leaked through the kitchen ceiling underneath it. A couple weeks later, during a monster storm, 3 of the light fixtures upstairs started leaking water. A month later, we noticed rust starting to show through the rendering on the corners of the house. There were heaps of smallish, easy-to-fix problems, but the kicker was that the balcony adjoining the master bedroom at the front of the house actually started to sag down, to the point that it was unsafe to go out there due to risk of collapse. We were mostly amenable and nice through most of this. The vendor, also the builder of course, was a small business, and we had no interest in making his life any more difficult than it already was for a small business owner. But conversely, we were pouring a lot of our hard-earned money into the mortgage and we wanted what we paid for. But for his own reasons, the builder just kept making it difficult to get things fixed. There was a seemingly endless list of excuses for not turning up at agreed times, a non-stop torrent of blame directed at his subcontractors, and just plain bad behavior like dodging our calls and not responding to our emails. Of course, we started proceedings with our state Consumers Affairs Department. After all, we were entitled to a statutory 7-year warranty on a new home. But that process takes time throughout which we were forced to endure issues like water leaks, a dangerous balcony we couldn't use, and a whole host of other issues that meant we were not enjoying our home. There shouldn't have been any dispute about his responsibility to fix these problems. He just chose to be an a-hole about it and make us go through the government process, presumably thinking we would give up before he was forced to do anything. At around the same time, we started getting the occasional knock at the door, only to open it and find a couple standing there with a brochure in their hands and our house pictured on the front. The first few of these conversations ended with us politely explaining that this was no longer a display house, it was our home. Without exception, they all apologized profusely and went away. After a month or so of this, I started to wonder, how was it that people still thought our house was a display home? I went looking and discovered that the builder's website still had our address listed for display. Despite repeated calls and emails, they steadfastly refused to remove our address from their website. This irritated me. These people would often come knocking on weekends, because that is when people go house shopping, right? But our pleas for the builder to update his site simply fell on deaf ears. However, enough was enough. An idea had formed. Did I mention I was in technology? First thing I did was scrape their website and set about the task of creating my own version of it using their exact look and feel. I highlighted every single problem we had found with the place. Every glamour shot was replaced with shots of the exact same feature, but showing the problems we had, just like rust showing through the rendering, water leaking from the light fixtures, close-ups of the sagging balcony, etc. You get the idea. By the time I was done, I had what I felt was the perfect alternate version of their website, one that highlighted every single defect in the home, as well as calling out all the problems we had in dealing with the builder. I even included testimonials that were simple copies of the BS emails and texts we received from the builder, avoiding his responsibilities and making lame excuses for not fixing our problems. The headline testimonial was the one where he responded with, "So just don't go out on the balcony," when I pointed out the clear safety risk it represented. After getting a lawyer friend to check through each page to make sure I was not opening myself up to some form of legal action, he helped me change a few sections, chuckling the whole time. I put the site up for hosting on some cheap and cheerful hosting provider Google told me about. Offshore, of course. I also registered a close but not close enough to be sued domain name to reach it. The next step was to create some actual collateral for execution of my plan. After all, there was no point going to all this effort unless I was actually able to direct people to the builder's website. So I took a copy of the brochure for our house that the builder had conveniently left a few behind of in one of the kitchen drawers, and set about creating my own version of it. Similar principles as the website, no contact information except the website address, aka my website address. By this time, I had made good friends with a few of my neighbors and we had taken to sharing a beer or two most nights on our front lawns. And wouldn't you know it, one of them was a manager for a local print shop. Given he already knew what hell we had been through with the builder, he took very little convincing to print off a run of my brochure for me on beautiful paper stock, nice and glossy, professional. I think it cost me half a dozen beers. Then came the final step in my plan. I waited for eager couples to turn up on my doorstep. Eyes wide open in wonder at the beauty of the home they were going to pay the builder for their very own copy of. For the next 6 months or so, whenever one of these couples would turn up and knock on my door and explain their purpose, I would let them know that this model home was selling so quickly that the builder had asked if I could hand out his updated brochure so potential buyers could go online and look up whatever the current display home address was. I don't know how many brochures I handed out. Of the 100 my neighbor printed for me, I probably only had 2 or 3 dozen left, but I know I also handed a bunch out to mates so they could have a laugh. I'd estimate close to 40 prospective buyers got a copy of my brochure, and I reckon at least 50 to 20 of those came back to thank me for warning them. A few of them had already signed conditional contracts and managed to get out of them one way or another. I don't know what happened to that builder in the end. I split up with the missus not too long after, and she sold the place not too long after that. At the time of writing this, the builder's website is gone, the domain still appears to be registered in the company's name, and their state business registration still appears to be active. As best as I can tell, he is no longer at the last known address for the company, and I cannot find any mention of the company online that is not at least 6 years old. Hopefully the dude is out of business now, and hopefully the few dozen people I helped sidestep the pain of dealing with him were the beginning of the end of his crappy little enterprise. If you stayed this long, thanks for reading, cheers. The next one is titled, and with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.